In today's podcast, we are going to be discussing the secrets of how to automate your local service business so that you can do the work of 10 people in seconds. Today, we are joined by Mike. He is the king of automations. Mike first developed automations for his own service business to save himself from a 100-hour work week. By leveraging the power of automation, Mike scaled and then sold his 7-figure lawn care and snow removal company. Mike then founded Simple Growth to help other business owners avoid pitfalls, use automations to grow, and achieve a better work-life balance. Welcome to Local Business Legends Podcast. In this podcast, we interview experts and successful local business owners in the home service industry space. I am your host. My name is Jordan Richards. I have generated thousands of leads and millions of dollars of additional revenue for local home service businesses through the use of digital marketing and lead generation. So, Mike, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today. We're going to have a lot of fun and discuss a lot of good stuff. So, first and foremost, I kind of want to jump back to your intro here. So, before starting Simple Growth and helping with automations, you owned your own lawn care business. Tell me a little bit more. How did you, like when you were growing up, did you always want to start a lawn care business? How did you get into that?
Awesome question, Jordan. Thanks for having me. First of all, appreciate what you're doing for the local businesses and service industries that you're serving here. But yeah, kind of cutting back, just like everybody else watching this or listening to this, started a lawn care business at the ripe age of probably 15 or 16. Parents instilled a really good work ethic, and it was about time that I wanted to get a car and impress the ladies back at high school. So they said, absolutely, you can have that car. Caveat to it is you got to be able to pay for the car insurance and buy the car. So there was literally a 36-inch ransom lawnmower sitting in the garage. And I said, well, I guess we're going to go into business unknowingly. So I started knocking some doors, and lo and behold, a couple of the local neighbors were crazy enough to trust me to cut their lawn. What turned into just something to actually get enough money to pay for a car, put some gas in it, get some insurance, ended up going through high school there, sophomore, junior, senior year, into college, 5 years of college. By the time we left college, I probably had 2, maybe 3 full-time crews and mowing. Cool thing about that was the really tight schedule between my playing junior hockey and actually going to school full-time, 40 credit hours of a pop, that I had actually kind of built this really cool business that I wasn't really on the truck most of the time. And I was literally unknowingly working on the business, not in it, as Michael Gerber would say. But there was some commonalities when we got to the point where I graduated. I looked at this fork in the road, as most people do, at some point, whether it's after college or working for the man and you're tired of them making money off you. Do I stay this corporate route or go this corporate route, or do I actually go out and start this business? In my case, continue it. So you can guess the route I went, Jordan. I said, well, I'm gonna attempt doing this lawn mowing business. I was making significantly more money, probably 6 figures plus at that point while I was full-time in college, than I would have in my corporate gig starting out. So to me, it was a no-brainer. I thought I was going to take the world over, but in kind of that world domination, I started looking at all the business owners locally that I really, really admired. So it was my buddy Bill that owned a lawn care company. He was crushing it, had 4 or 5 trucks out there. Another guy that owned a masonry company. By all imagination, the guy was loaded, huge house. I used to actually go weed his landscape beds, and he'd give me cash at the end of the season so I could go book my spring break trip to Cancun every year. So I'm looking at this guy as well, John, and I'm like, like there's a commonality between these guys, why they look so successful. And to compound problems, one of the professors owned a really large supermarket locally, small business, not a chain. But there was a commonality between all 3 of them. And Jordan, I don't know if you really can guess what it is, but they were the center of the chaos in their business. Everything that happened in that business had to go through these guys. Unlike my business up to this point where I just couldn't physically do any of these things. And I even went over to Europe for 2 or 3 months and studied abroad while this business is still alive. And it worked pretty good. I mean, there was some hiccups, but it worked pretty good all in all. So I went out after college. I said, well, how do I become the center of this chaos? So everything in this business now had to go through me because I knew best. I had 5 years of school, which didn't teach me anything, to be honest with you, outside of some time management. But long story short, I was working 80 to 100 hours a week. And this business was growing. It was profitable by all things imagined. It was successful. I'm like, I look like these other guys. I don't have a life, but man, I got this business. We're making a lot of money and we're good. But I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart through college, and never forget it. You can't even make this kind of stuff up. But if you haven't seen me on stage and tell the story, Jordan, believe it or not, she actually came home on Valentine's Day and said, Mike, I'm out of here. This business is running your life. So you can well imagine, literally hit rock bottom. And to add injury to insult, there was a lake effect snowstorm that came into Rochester, New York that night. And we got hit with almost a foot of snow unexpected. So being at lows of lows, I ended up going over to my parents' house, breaking down. But on the way there, I called my buddy Dean, who owned a driveway sealing company. And he was plowing over 1,000 residential driveways. We had about 600 at that point, plus a full commercial portfolio. So I called Dean, I called Rick, one of our managers, and said, boys, this is what's going on. I'm not going to make it out tonight. But in any time you get a foot of snow, Jordan, in upstate New York, I don't care how good your company is, the phone's going to ring in the morning. Some driveways got missed. You had some issues. The craziest thing is we didn't have a single call, no complaints. Here I was out, down and out, basically got hit by a bus. And one of my biggest direct competitors had my client list and the phone, and my manager had it. And that business didn't need me. Took a couple of weeks for that to actually hit me. But as I was searching the internet, how to get your life back from your business, I found the book called The 4-Hour Work Week by a gentleman, Tim Ferriss. So I went down that rabbit hole, and I found something called life cycle marketing. It was developed by Scott Martineau and Clayton Mass, the CEO of Keep, which used to be Infusionsoft. So we went out and actually bought a automation platform, because I literally, after going through that, thought I would be living on the beaches of Thailand and Bali with Tim Ferriss while this fully automated lawn care business would be running. So obviously I woke up the next morning and was like, that's probably not going to happen. But over 3 to 5 years, we went through and automated all the parts of the business. So it went from 80 to 100 hours a week to 3 to 5 hours in the business to eventually becoming an absentee owner.
Wow. So
the crazy thing here is just not to cut you off, but I think it's sitting here just to put this perspective. Clayton Mass, the guy I found right here, just released a book, Conquer the Chaos. If you haven't seen it, really, really good book. First 2 words in this book are Mike Callahan. It tells the story I just told you in a little bit more depth and how we actually conquered the chaos. So that's our new mission, helping business owners take their life back from the business. And hopefully they're not making the same mistakes I did in the early years.
Cool. So I kind of want to break that down. You said you were working 80 to 100-hour work weeks. Of that 100-hour work week, can you kind of break it down? Like, what percent of that 100 hours were you stuck in the field? What percent were you doing office work? And what percent were you calling people? Like, can you break that 100-hour work week down for me?
It all depends where we're at in the business. But yeah, so like in the early days, folks are saying like I worked up from sun up to sundown. No, I was like literally working before the sun was up, and then literally, after the sun was down. And looking back at it, man, was it self-inflicted. So I was there in the office before we had a full-time admin staff, going out and setting the schedules, printing them out or putting them in the mobiles. I was gassing the trucks up. I was getting them ready, putting the guys out. If somebody, no call, no show employee, the worst thing I could have possibly ever done at that point, I jumped back on the truck instead of literally doing what the business owner needs to be doing, is setting the vision, building the team, and delivering results, and hopefully leading with care in the middle of that. But that was everything. I mean, if there was a fire to be put out, it was almost like I thrived on it. And I remember back in the early days, before that divorce, and she really put the hammer down on me. I remember to the day, it was one of my brother's buddies, Matt Grace. We became pretty good buddies. But Matt and I, at I think 10 o'clock at night, were literally in my garage with a chain lift sharpening blades on a couple of the trucks. Mm. So what was, the question of what was I doing? The question was, what wasn't I doing? Now, obviously, the business evolved after that, that turnaround time. It didn't happen overnight, but we started to grab the chunks. And then when it got really clear is when Paul, that was running Callahan's Lawn Care, I was pretty much an absentee owner outside of running the finances and putting a hand on some of the marketing stuff that I like to do. Paul blew out his Achilles tendon, and I came back into my new chaos. And what I found is that I thought our business didn't have a culture, but the business actually had a culture. It was just not what I left. And it was pretty ugly. So we had a really heavy turnover from the fall to the winter when we shifted to plowing. But traditionally we would do quote unquote like exit interviews for the guys that didn't plow, but they'd come back in the spring. But what we found is I was running this part again. There was unprecedented amount of guys, and it was like right near the fall when I took it back over. There was unprecedented amount of guys that literally were just quitting. They weren't coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a different type of exit interview. It was like, hey, why are you leaving? Is it the guy that was running the company, Paul? Like, nah, he's all right. We don't love him. We don't hate him. But he was all right. He was fair. Just like, all right, so it's not him. Well, was it the company? Like, no, we love the company. Like, things are good. I'm like, all right, then it's got to be the pay. Like, we're not paying you enough. We can pay you more. Like, they're like, no, actually, they were pretty honest. Most of them like, you're actually paying us more than most other companies, especially with the pay per performance that we were doing at that point. They're like, no, that's the issue. All this business is a paycheck. There's nothing else to it.
Hmm.
So we invested a serious amount of money. We flew out to Arizona and got really clear on what we stood for. So really, it was our purpose, why we existed. We created core values that we ended up hiring, training, and firing to, or coach up or coach out, as I like to say. And we got really clear on our organizational chart now and in the future. So the interesting thing is Paul healed up for the most part, and I flew him out there with us. But we did this process that we now use in the Simple Growth Masterminds. We call it a future org chart. So we just list all the positions and all the responsibilities. Nobody's name's on it, but you're just literally putting this together. And what would it look like in 3 years as well? But in the current state, we take smaller sticky notes, like should buy stock in sticky notes if you see how many we use, but we're putting these little sticky notes with names on each one of these spots now. And lo and behold, Paul had like 15 different jobs he was doing.
Mm.
There's no way he could have been good or even great, you know what I mean, at any of these. But it allowed us to visually see what was being done and who was doing it. And that allowed us to look ahead and say, okay, what's our next future hire? How do we pull some of these things off and get more intentional? So that was kind of the evolution. But like literally, as many of the businesses we work with, hundreds a year, that's where like, well, don't get me wrong, Simple Growth is making some money, but I think the main benefit or the profit to me personally is I can see individuals about to make the mistakes we made, or they're in the middle of that chaos. And it's literally, if we can just pull them out for 5 to 10 minutes, they're like, oh, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, in the middle of that, we had about a third of our company, literally our crew leaders and technicians, left, staged a mutiny and created a competing company.
Wow.
And I walked in Monday mornings. I always do, I was getting everything going. And you may ask, what did you do when a third of your employees weren't there in that chaos? I actually jumped on a truck in some wild imagination that I would be able to mow 3 crews worth of work that just 6 people, right?
Yeah.
And I continued this insanity for almost 2.5 weeks till I literally almost had a heart attack.
Yeah.
And then I did exactly what I should have done from day one. I should have went right to the office and started working the database of people we already interviewed, and we had ranked A, B, and C without a driver's license. But when you're in the thick of it, you don't think about those things. So I bet you there was even more than that I was doing, because I was just going with no intentionality.
Gotcha. So if I love all like the org chart and all those different attributes. So if heaven forbids something happened, and if you had to start all over from zero, Mike, and you were starting a local home service business, what things would you put in place before you ever even do your very first job? Like what things needed to be done before ever doing anything?
Well, I guess if our back's against the wall and we need to make money immediately, that's a little bit different than I'm actually going in and resetting this. But if I'm going in and starting and I don't have to put food on the table immediately, there's some foundational pieces that we really want to get in place, in my opinion. And this is how I would tackle it.
Yeah.
And it's done really in about 6 steps, but the first 2 or 3 in my mind are instrumental. So if I'm going to go restart this and I really want a solid business, first thing I'm going to do is look at my time management. So ideally, you want to work about 20% of your time strategically on the business. Now, if you're just going to be a one-person entrepreneur, this may not be feasible to 20%. But I would say you got to have at least 4 hours a week. I don't care if it's an hour over 4 days or all one time, but this is like your non-disturbed time. Like unless the house is on fire or something like that, this is what you're doing. But basically, you're doing strategic things going in and building that business. And then in addition to really getting tied into your time management and blocking some strategic time out. If it's just you, you'd want to do that. But you'd also, if you have a larger team and you're kind of reinventing the team, we want to teach the team how to time block and get certain things done. And within that, you want to have one-on-one meetings with your team members so you can support them. But if it's just starting out and it's just you, have the meetings with yourself, talk to yourself, whatever that is. But you got to have that time, because just like me, if all the fires happen, then there's no time to actually work on it. Second step, which is probably the most important step, and unless you have the time to do it, it's not going to happen. But if you're going out, ideally, like when we built Simple Estimate, my third business now that hopefully we should be breaking 7 figures here shortly. It doesn't matter like this home service industry you really need to get your financial house in order. And there's some key metrics that you really need to know, or at least be able to project. But I want to know what it costs me per hour to operate, break even before I make a profit. And then we're going to be able to get a non-emotional revenue per man hour. So the difference between what you're charging and what it's costing you is your bottom line net profit before taxes. Secondarily is we've got to stop robbing Peter to pay Paul. What I mean by that is we need to separate our business and our personal finances. Another great book, Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Without diving into the whole book, there's some really simple takeaways that we really need to do. The first of which Mike doesn't hit on in the book, but I'll hit on because I think it's equally important as the other two, is the business owner needs to be paid a fair market wage. Let me say that again. You as the business owner need to be getting a paycheck or a draw if it's an LLC, because legally you can't take a paycheck, but it's technically a paycheck. You are getting your weekly paycheck. So if you were to go hire somebody in your market and it costs $65,000 to hire that individual, you as the business owner need to be getting that in a paycheck. Is if you get hit by a bus, you need to be able to replace yourself. Now, you may take some of that and reinvest that into the business as a personal contribution in the early days, but it's got to be budgeted. And I think you need to feel the ebbs and flows of that cash flow, because we'll have people come to these live events we do. And we had a young guy come up last year and said, Mike, I'm crushing it. I made $200,000 last year. I was like, wow, that's awesome. And knowing the size of the business he was in my market without saying his name, I said, hey, Dave, what kind of debt do you have on all those trucks that are sitting out in the parking lot? Well, that debt is actually had on your balance sheet. So we need to account for that. I go, how much you pay? And so we figured that out, and it was maybe he's down about $100,000 now. And I go, what are you paying yourself? He goes, well, I just take whatever money I need out of the business account and I just draw it out. I go, all right, well, let's back out what your paycheck should have been. The guy ended up it was like $15,000 or $20,000 profit, which was still good. But at the end of the day, there was that misconception that he thought he was making $200,000. He wasn't. So I'm going to say, build a market-based wage in there, build that into your expenses and your overhead recovery. And the other two things that I'm going to really highly recommend from Profit First: create a profit account. So a portion of the profits, a percentage, twice a week. I believe Mike does it on the 14th and the 10th and 24th. We do it on the 15th and 30th, whatever it is, twice a month, the same day, religiously. You pull the percentage of the profit out, or projected profit, you put in savings account. You don't touch it, because if you don't pull the profit out, you're going to end up spending it somewhere. You'll never see it. But that's the additional part from, say, your $65,000. The additional part is the money you have for your draw or your distributions. You're pulling those profits out. But if it's not there, you can't pull it out of the business. And the second piece is taxes. Nobody wants to talk about it, but depending on your state, you've got quarterly taxes or yearly taxes you're going to have to pay. When you get big enough, you're going to have to do quarterly. I think yearly is even more dangerous, because it sits in that operating account, and that's your money, you think. But no, really, it's the government and the states. And then in addition, depending on your state, you may have sales tax. So in upstate New York, between where you're at, 7.5% to 8%. That's sitting in your operating account as well, Jake. So, or Jordan, I mean, so in theory, you're thinking that's your money, but it's not. So you have this false sense of security. So set up your time to block the time out, create your profit account, and create your tax account. And an interesting, like, 2-minute kind of story, like how bad this tax thing can get. And like I said, like, we've done it wrong. Like, we've done it twice and probably got it wrong. Sometimes we got lucky enough to get it right. I will tell you, the tax thing, we got wrong, and we got it wrong in a bad way, but we got lucky. I'm driving down one of the major highways in New York, 490. I'm off the truck in my personal car, I think. And my accountant, Greg, calls me. He goes, Mike, where are you at? I'm like, I'm on 490, about 2 exits before this bar, Trotta. Just opened up, rooftop bar, probably about this time. Gorgeous out. And he was all right, cool, pull over and, drop out of the parking lot of Trot. I'm like, sick. What a better time. I'm going to go and meet my accountant, have a couple cocktails and review our taxes. Got to be a great end of the day, right around 4:35 happy hour. So I pull into the parking lot and he's still on the phone. I'm like, all right, Greg, I'll be in a minute. Where are you sitting? He goes, well, I'm not in the bar. I go, what? You're on the rooftop, right? He goes, no, I'm not even there. I'm like, why in the hell do you have me in this parking lot? He goes, are you in the parking spot with the thing parked? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, all right. I just want to make sure before I drop this news on you, you're not driving down the highway. He goes, you owe $43,000 or $45,000, somewhere in that range of taxes tomorrow.
Wow.
We moved some money around and we made our tax payment, but that's how crazy it can be. Because as far as I was concerned, that money in the bank, that 43 to 45,000, that was my money, but it wasn't. So if we're running that business by the bank account balance, we can get in big, big trouble. And I'm also going to suggest along the finances, if we're talking about it, because this is the most important part of business. Great stripes in the lawn, great design build. That's all great, but it means nothing unless you can pay yourself and pay your employees. And that's why you got into this with obviously work-life balance. But you got to be running those. You got to have your QuickBooks reconciled by the 10th or 15th of the last month. So if I'm going into this month, by the 15th, it's reconciled and I can look at it. Most businesses wait to November, December, or even February the next month or next year when they go to file those corporate taxes in March, and then they clean it all up. And you have no idea. So it's way too late to do that. And that's where right after that divorce where I got in trouble, the guys that ran all the nightclubs knew I used to be a nightclub DJ and they heard what happened. So they called me like, hey, do you want to come get back in the scene? Free bar tab. We'll pick you up. We'll drop you off. Really good cash. I'm like, what better time to be single, right? We'll get back into the nightclub industry. So what I did is something I'd never done before. Mm-hmm. I started looking at my bank account balance because I was going out and working Wednesday through Sunday night, partying, being an idiot. But basically I'd always look. And if there was 125, 150,000 ballpark in that bank account at that size of the business, that's about where it normally sat. The issue is Tammy and Christine that ran the office and the financials at that time got so good at running credit cards and getting payments on time that we were actually getting the money in before the bills were due, and it didn't catch me to November, or maybe the beginning of December. We lost about $75,000 or $80,000 that summer, and I didn't even know it hit me until it was too late. Thank God we had a good summer. So those are some cautionary tales. If you're going out and scaling service business, protect your time and get your financial house in order, and hopefully don't try to do everything. Create a really simple business, 3 to 5 businesses or services that have reoccurring revenue. Kind of long-winded, but I mean there's about 6 steps I'd recommend. Those 3 are essential.
I love that. So I really like that first step about blocking your time. There's, as business owners, there's so many things that are super important for us to do, yet they could theoretically be procrastinated. I was just talking to one of my clients, and we generated him, hundreds of leads in a month. And he called me. He's like, "Hey, Jordan, I'm just not growing." And I'm like, "How are you not growing if we just generated you 100 leads this month?" And we kind of did a deep dive, and we saw that his sales system, that when a call came through, he's like, "Oh, I can just let it go to voicemail." Or if a form came through from his website, he's like, "Oh, I'll just get to that form tomorrow when I have time." When, as you know, Mike, if you don't get to these leads super quickly, like the chances of you closing them go down drastically. So with leads being one example of something that you could theoretically procrastinate getting to, Mike, what advice do you have for people who are procrastinating these super important things like setting up business systems, getting to leads? What can people do to stop procrastinating the things that should be done first?
Yes, I mean, I like to say speed wins. My buddy Garrett Matthews is running probably close to 10 million out of Shreveport, Louisiana. He's one of our 7-figure coaches. As Garrett says, speed kills, and it does. It will kill a business. So literally, today's consumer wants to literally check it off their checklist. That post-COVID buying habit, almost on demand. Netflix, Uber, DoorDash, the list goes on and on and on. Amazon. That is like the most important thing. So the first to pick up the phone is going to win. The first to respond to an estimate is going to win. So speed and going in. Hopefully we're not talking about the same individual, but I had a similar call from one of our clients who had 40 estimates literally sitting on his desk this morning, and it's been there since Monday. I'm like,
Oh,
so when we do these upsells, we average probably 60 to 80 estimate requests in the first 24 hours to 48 hours. But we tell them when it goes out, like, be ready, because you've got to hit these, right? Because we're not just talking to their clients, we're talking to their leads, and we're talking to their canceled clients and loss estimates. So everybody in the database, with except the crazy people. So we really like harp on the clients and say, hey, listen, this is essential. Like, you're paying good money, but if you do this, it's going to pay for everything you're doing marketing wise for the whole year, just in this one shot. So I would say, yeah, you got to look at that. That is the number one killer. We just did without mentioning the company's name, but this is a wild story. So we just did a service autopilot regional training event in upstate New York. And it was a cleaning company. So obviously you work with a lot of different service companies, but this is applicable. So they had a cleaning company and really dialed in. They serviced one postal code, and that was it. And you could drive from one end of the postal code to the other in under 10 minutes. Crazy route density. Company was doing north of $3 million, I believe. And she goes, Mike, we're kind of bottlenecked. We want to get to 4 million in sales. So we start walking through some things and talking. And Jordan, you'll never guess what they didn't have. This is going to blow your mind.
I want to guess a office assistant.
Didn't need one. Well, I guess they needed one internally. They didn't have a phone or a phone number.
What? How do
So
you
I literally said,
make money without?
you want to add another million, get a phone number and pick it up in the first 3 rings. Send me my $20,000 commission to this address, basically. Telltale signs now, from what I've heard, is they've actually put this in play, and it is astronomical now, the amount of volume and things they were missing. But the analogy, the comparison's the same thing. If you're not picking up the phone in the first 3 rings or getting right back to them or responding to those website things within minutes or hours, they're just going down that list in Google. In this company, like, I don't know how you could physically do $3 million in one postal code, but there was even more work in there that they had no idea, because they started to actually, they created a phone line and then they actually answered it. But first, I mean, to scale to $1 million this year, like in this ecosystem, in my opinion, if I was to start all over, if you were to add another thing to that, is just pick up the phone. That's all you need to do is win or respond to the estimate request.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny that you mentioned that. I literally did a deep dive with a client this week. In last month, she was able to we generated 94 phone calls from Google Ads alone. So this does not include SEO. This does not include seeing their trucks or business cards or referrals. This is strictly from Google Ads alone, nothing else. She received 94 phone calls, right? And the cost per lead there was like around 30, which for her profit margins, if she had a decent close rate with those 94 phone calls, she just made thousands and thousands of dollars of profit. And I was talking to her, and she's like, yeah, we didn't really get too many clients from that. And I'm like, what? You got 94 phone calls and you didn't get very many? She's like, no. And then I looked at the one cool thing Google Ads can do is it can time whenever somebody calls specifically from a Google ad, it times how long the call is before they hang up. And if you don't answer the phone within, like you said, 3 rings, there's instantly like 10-20% people hang up in the first 3 rings. It's kind of weird. People do it, but like they trusted you just barely enough to call you. They don't trust you enough from a Google ad to sit on the phone for very long.
You nailed it. I don't care what industry and service industry, consumers do not trust contractors, and they do not trust themselves to choose a contractor. You need to be different. And I'm sure you talk to this with all your clients, but if you're doing those Google local service ads, there's 2 main things that are going to kill you, and you nailed it. You got to pick up the phone, because Google has the analytics. They're going to reward the companies that pick up first.
Yep.
And on top of that, the inbox that comes in, that needs to be emptied at a very minimum at least once a day. Those 2 things right there will literally like destroy you. So if she's at $30 a lead, if she just hammered on that for the next 3 months, it's potentially she could drop that down to $10 lead and her conversion doubles. And then finally, Google knows, since they came in from that ad, that if they are in there and they do give you a positive review, that is the trifecta. So you really want to make sure when you land those people from those Google local ads that you're forcing them or just at least pushing them to get you those reviews. Because if you can answer the phone quick, you empty that inbox out at least once or twice a day, minimum once a day, and you can get good reviews. That ad and that the relevancy of that ad is going to be phenomenal. But I think a lot of business owners are going to hire a professional like you, and you're going to tell them this. But if they don't listen to that advice, I'm kind of hopefully preaching to the choir here again, like, hey, like you need to do these things because that is going to be your keys to success.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying there. Like, yeah, Google is always shifting how SEO works. It's taken a pretty big shift to well, it's always shifting this way. Google loves what are called signals. Somebody leaving you a review, that's a signal. You replying to that review, that's another signal, right? There's all these like little micro signals that we can give Google, right? Way before we ever blog posts and those type of things and adding content to the website are super, super important. But we can't forget about the little things like getting Google reviews. It doesn't matter if you have 1,000 blog posts on your website. If you have 10 Google reviews from the day one you open and it's been 7 years since you've gotten a new one, right? Those are just signals and SEO things you're just missing out on. And yeah, 100%. The better you treat Google with local service ads and Google ads, the more they will recommend you. And by recommend, I mean showing up on Google, getting a lower cost per click, all those things.
Yeah, and there's really never been a better time right now. Because I mean, literally, I've got one of our clients here. I did a test where we sent out these mailers here with QR codes to go to the AI tool Simple Estimate. But there was never a better time because originally back in the day, I would print this out for Callahan's Lawn Care. We dropped $70,000-$80,000 in a month in literally postage, and we didn't know until we mailed it out how many people were going to call, what was the average conversion rate, what was the cost per client, how long were they going to stay. I mean, so you've got your social, you got Google, all these analytics now are at your fingertips. So there was never a time ever before in history where we could actually go out and test these things and iterate on them and dive into them to actually accelerate the return on investment. Great book too. If people are learning this stuff or reading about it is Day Trading Attention, I believe it's called, by Gary Vaynerchuk. Great book. I'm diving into about 3/4 of it now. But Gary kind of dives into the psychology of literally when he started on YouTube when no one was there and he was buying the word wine for his dad's liquor store, I think at 5 cents per lead. And when it hit $1, he thought the world was going to end. Like obviously fast forward, it's totally different, right? But he's trying to find those areas where there's not as much competition, but there's attention to be grabbed. But I think that the story to be kind of pulled out of that here as we're talking about this is you don't have to drop $50,000 or $60,000 or $10,000 in direct mail like we had to back in the past. You can go to a professional like Jordan and really iterate these things through his guidance. And then if you got something that really hooks, then you go in, maybe add some print mail. But now you know, at least to a statistical realm, how successful it should be. Is the hook, is the copy, is the pain point you're addressing actually appropriate?
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And, in the world of marketing, I'm all about testing. Like, clients ask me, Jordan, should I do direct mail? Should I do this? Should I do that? And I always say the same thing. I'm like, let's test it, but don't bother testing it if you're not going to track it, right? If you're going to do these direct mail, you need to know exactly how much you spent and at the end of it, how many leads you got. I actually have a funny story. I had this client, we started working with him, and as we were looking through his stuff, in his marketing budget, there was an extra $4,000 going somewhere. We asked him about it. He's like, oh, I have a billboard right in the middle of my local service area. And I'm like, okay, let's look at this. How much does that billboard cost? He's like, it's about $4,000 a year. I'm like, okay. How many clients did you get from the billboard last year with that 4,000? He's like, oh yeah, I think I only got about 3. And I'm like, okay, 3 clients. So you spent 4,000. We'll make the number simple. We'll say he got 4 clients. So I'm like, okay, so you got 4 clients. You spent 4,000 to get 4 clients. So your cost per client is about $1,000. And for your local home service business, that is a terrible,
And the
money.
kicker is maybe he's doing lawn mowing, and his total revenue, not even profit, is $850. So he hasn't even recovered his ad investment on that.
Exactly.
So it's going to take him over a year just to break even on that client if they stick around. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing is like, what's the return on ad spend? How quickly can you recover the CAC or client acquisition cost?
Yeah, and then I love that. And so okay, so like take continue the story here. So it's like okay, your cost per client for your local home store, $1,000 per client, right? We were running Google Ads for him, and he had a $18 cost per lead at the time. And so I was like, okay. Oh, sorry. That billboard that 4 clients, those are actually 4 leads, not 4 clients. So those weren't even closed clients, right? So we're running Google Ads for him, and he was getting great cost per click, but more importantly, and for anyone listening, Google Ads cost per click is nothing compared to the most important number, which is cost per lead, right? Cost per phone call. So we looked at it, and his cost per lead was $18 total, average that year. So okay, so you're with a billboard, you spent 4,000, you got cost per lead of $1,000 per lead. With your Google Ads, you got a cost per lead of $18. If you would have spent that exact same $4,000 into the Google Ads account that we had set up for you, you would have gotten 222 leads, right? And if you have a decent close rate, that's, more than paying for itself, 10 times over versus the money that he just dumped down the toilet. And like I said, the only reason he did this is because he just had a gut feeling that like, oh, I think, the billboard would do good. It's right in the middle of my service area. Now that logically makes sense, but your gut is nothing compared to just the solid numbers at the end of the day. And so we were
You
able
really
to,
already nailed it there. So I mean, that is, you asked like, if I'm going to rebuild a business, step number one was literally getting the time blocking. 2 was getting the finances. 3 was going in to build a simple business. So hopefully you can sell everything over the phone and they can upsell off the additional services. So if I do fertilization, weed control, I'm doing perimeter pest and mosquito. I can do all that while I'm there, right? So we've got the simple business. 4th part is we need to basically build our bench, hire 8 players, build a recruiting, training, and onboarding process. Step number 5 is marketing, client acquisition. And this is my favorite part of it because you nailed it. And I agree with you 100%. But I got to give credit where credit's due. Jonathan Potoshnik, co-founder, Service Autopilot, long-term millionaire, had this great analogy. He said, imagine you got this vending machine and all your perfect clients are sitting in there. And I'm going to dial back from what Jordan just said because he nailed it. So you've got a lower lead cost, but eventually what that's going to boil down to is you're not emotionally going to know what it costs you to acquire a client. And on average, out of how many leads traditionally come in, what your closing percentage. So leads, you're closing at 20% or 50%. And on average, it's costing me $150 for every fertilization client. So Jordan, like literally, if you've got this vending machine in there, how many $150 are you going to pop in? As many as you can, because statistically they keep kicking out.
my bank account.
And that's what it dials down to. So we could be doing lawn mowing, fertilizing, home cleaning. We could be selling men's suits. It doesn't matter. Business becomes a math game and it's non-emotional. So a lot of people are like, Mike, why would you, or how did you even fathom spending $75,000 to $80,000 between the middle of March and the beginning of April in upstate New York? Because I knew if I put that out, I'd get X amount of clients statistically across each 3 of these marketing sources. And I knew once they came in, they would stay on average so long and how much money it would generate. It was purely a math game. And that's where the next level of this goes in. Once you get enough to handle that base and you cover your costs, you've got to be really particular and track this stuff. Because if you don't, it's just like throwing darts at a dartboard. And I'm speaking to myself as much as anybody else listening to this. The other thing is there is no silver bullet. So I'll pick on Josh and Simple Estimate. So everything was going really good on our Facebook ads, pretty predictable. Show up rate to the demos, closing ratio was about 15 to 18% higher than the national average from a Facebook ad for our industry. But through Memorial Day weekend and some of that, like the pipe just kind of like there was more bookings than normal, but they didn't show up. So he was literally, we went in at our sales call today. Happy birthday, Josh, if you're watching live. But literally, Josh turned off the ads. I was like, what are you doing? like over the last month, statistically, this is hitting the numbers. But he's like, well, it didn't really work this week. Let's try this, the next shiny object. Like, squirrel,
Mm.
we can't. We got to go
Yeah.
deep. And it's not going to happen overnight. And there's going to be some seasonal anomalies. So I'm saying this as much for myself, probably watching this later than everybody else, but you got to go deep. You got to stay. And if you're working with a professional like Jordan, you got to trust the process, but you can't like just be stuck in the current. You've got to let it run 3 to 6 months at least and make sure the stats work. There is no perfect thing, but if you don't go deep enough, I'll usually imagine, Jordan, if we're digging this well, right? But instead of water, there's clients, and they're a perfect ideal, like most profitable clients. We're digging down. We have a couple trickle up. We got 3 or 4. Do we stop? Or do we know that now we've got some stats? We take that $1,000 ad spend and we bump that up to 1,500 or 2,000. We're going down a little bit deeper. And I really start percolating up. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got a gold mine. And then a lot of times people stop doing whatever works for some reason because they think everything's magically fixed, or worse, it's working, but you stay at that ad spend. But you want to continue to go down deeper and deeper and deeper. And eventually, as you're going through that, you're going to hit some roadblocks like Josh hit. But I'd like, Josh, let's A/B split test this. Maybe we dial back a little bit over the holiday week, or maybe from Friday to Monday over that holiday, we triple down because most people are going to be on their phones flipping and posting because they're not at work. But
Right.
we're able to see what works not emotionally. My dad had this great saying, numbers talk and basically emotion walk, or he used to say bullshit walks. But that's what we're doing. Like we're assuming on emotion. You got to have non-emotional data.
Right. I love that. I a lot of the time I spend is stopping myself from going to shiny object syndrome, helping others see that that's not quite so shiny. One bonus I want to add into this podcast for the listeners, I ran a test not too long ago, going back to like the phone topic of how long are people willing to sit on the phone before they hang up and move to the next company on the list in Google. And one shiny object syndrome that I found a lot of business owners love to use is the pre-recorded message or the phone tree. Meaning, if I call your business, if I hear like, hey, this call may be recorded, da, 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 before ever talking to a human, that's a pre-recorded message. Or press 1 to talk to sales, press 2 to do, that's a phone tree, right? I ran a test. Every second long your pre-recorded message is 1% of your phone rings, phone leads gone every second long. And then if you have a phone tree, that's 15% instantly gone, right? So I had a client, I did this test for 3 clients, right? One client had a 10-second long pre-recorded message. One client had a phone tree with a 10-second long pre-recorded message. And then one client had none of the above, right? The client who had 10-second long pre-record, 10% of his phone calls never got to him, right? His leads just, and he was paying for these leads, right? With, SEO costs time and expertise. Google ads costs a budget, and 10% of his calls were just gone because he had this cute little, he's like, oh, it saves me so much time. You know, and then the other client who had 10-second long pre-recorded message plus phone tree, 25% of his calls never got to him. 25% of his marketing efforts instantly disappeared, right? And so I called him. I'm like, hey, do you want to get 25% more leads this month? He's like, heck yeah. Like, what business owner wouldn't want to say 25% more leads, no additional cost, no additional anything? Every business owner on planet Earth would say, yes, I want that. No additional. I'm like, sweet, take off that phone tree. He's like, but it's so cool. I'm like, yeah, it's cool. Is it cool enough to, cost you? And like, you can do the cost analysis. I'm like, is it worth this much to have that cool feature? He's like, oh, that's a lot. I'm like, darn sure is a lot. So let's take that off. And then sure enough, the next month, he was back to normal. He got 25% more leads. His marketing dollars were going farther. His cost per lead was improving. His cost per client was improving. And like I said, this all boiled down to, oh, I'm a business owner. There's this cool little phone system thing that my phone company offered me. Heck yeah, I'm using that. But little do they know that costs them, depending on your size, thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars just for that cool shiny object.
Love it. Love it.
So awesome. Well, last question for you, Mike, before we wrap up here. Um, what would you say, um, if there was like a math equation? We kind of touched on this already. If there was a math equation, this plus this equals a healthy business. What would you say those variables are, um, that would be helpful?
Yes, understanding your numbers and be able to job cost, not emotionally. So get your financial house in order. Like you need to know your break even point, what you're charging per hour for per division, your break even per division. So I would call these like your KPIs, basically. Um, the sales part, we want to know your lead conversion, your cost to acquire the clients, and the client lifetime value. So we've got your finance part and you've got your marketing acquisition part. The third piece within the first step is once you have all of these foundational pieces together manually and you've blueprinted them out, we automate them. So the repetitive, mundane tasks, we automate them. So we're going to blueprint and then we're going to automate. And don't try to eat the whole elephant at once. Do it piece by piece. But once you got your finances, your estimating with job costing tiled in, and you've automated, step number two is hopefully you've evolved to a business of at least seven figures, 750 to a million. Then we're going to get really strategic because Jordan, you and I, for sure, I don't know about anybody else listening, but I can tell you, you and I right now at a million, our leadership skills are not what they need to be at 2 to 3 to 5 or 10 million. So we need to go in, and that's the bottleneck when we get there is going to be systems, people, and culture, and tied into leadership. So the idea is Clayton Mass, the CEO of Keep, said it best when they were at 100 million in recurring revenue on their way to 200 million. He stood up in a company meeting and said, "Hey guys and girls, I'm not the leader I need to be at 2 million. I will evolve and get coaching and education. So when we get to 2 million, I'll be the leader I need to be." And I think that's part of the problem. That's the second piece. Because once we got this business and we get everything humming, you don't evolve as a leader. And the capacity or growth of your business is capped on the ability of the leader. We needed to get away from all the things I was doing in the early days. So there's really three things in this leadership role of the business owner. They're really simple. We're going to set the vision. We're going to build the team, and we're going to deliver results. And part of build the results is we don't want to run out of money. But if we stick on that and we lead with care, we're going to be able to evolve. We continue to do education, whether it's simple growth masterminds or a coaching group. There's a lot of stuff out there. We need to evolve. But the second piece of that is, especially in the home services industry, but even with simple growth, we're pulling people up out of the field, crew leaders or technicians, and we're usually promoting within, or sometimes we pull without. But the problem is those individuals, as much as you, if not even more, do not have the leadership skills to continue and evolve and pull the stuff off your shoulders as a business owner. So we got to invest in ourselves. But the cool thing we see at the Simple Growth Masterminds when we got these business owners coming in for 6 to 8, 12 months, building these leadership chops, is they've realized now that they're bringing the team in and everybody else is working together, that now the cool thing is we're seeing their leadership team start to show up. And sometimes the business owner's not there, but their team is, because they've realized they need to upgrade their team to get to the next level. And the pure unfortunate part of this is, I was just talking to Brandon Peterman, owns a really large fertilization company. But Brandon and I talked about it. Some people that get you to 1 million or 2 million, they're not going to get you to 4 to 5 or 10. They're just literally hit a personal cap, or they're not willing to invest in themselves, even if you're giving it to them, to upgrade their leadership skills or the capacity to get you there. So once you got the foundation, it's literally about leadership and strategy and executing. And the business owner literally has a leadership team that executes on there. So build your the financial, you're estimating job costing, build the foundational pieces so it's not chaotic. It's good and working good manually. Automate it. Step number 2, you got to become the leader you need to be. And now you got to upgrade the people on your team to become the leaders they need to be, or go out and find people that have that skill set that can upgrade you. Step number 3, sit back, relax, and let that business work magic for you.
I love that. Love that. That's really solid. So thank you so much, Mike. Mike, I want to give you an opportunity. What for the listeners, what exactly is Simple Growth, and what does it do for them, and who are you exactly in that company?
So I am the owner and founder. really, I'm just here to help business owners take their life back from the business and hopefully avoid the chaos that I kind of talked about in my personal life. So that's literally, at least we're up to about 20, 25 full-time team members in Simple Growth. Anybody the current clients actually interact with, right down to our first client from Simple Growth, Dylan, who sold his business. The main 8 to 10 people that you would interact with have all been past clients, have sold their businesses and actually have come back to align with that mission. So it's very unique. But to answer your question more directly, we basically have 3 divisions of Simple Growth. First one started out is marketing automations, done for you. Literally build it out. We have over 200 services, have pre-built written marketing content. You come to us, we set it up, we support it, we update it, we take care of the automations. You run your business. Like I said, the upsells alone usually pay for themselves in the first month. Second part is sometimes we had some of these businesses, going back to those 3 steps you talked about. Some businesses came to us and foundationally they were a disaster. Not to their own fault, just no job costing, didn't know the numbers, some of the marketing stuff. We went in and said, ethically, we can't sell you these automations. We got to fix this part and then we'll automate it. Because if we automate it right now, we're going to 10x a bad system. So we go in and set up the estimating, the job costing, the financials. Totally turnkey. We work with people remotely or in person. So automations, estimating, job costing, financials. Third part has been the latest addition to the team is people who are at 7 figures wanted to get to 8 figures. So a lot of people like, well, are we going to listen to you talk for 3 days, Mike? I don't talk at all. So I actually went out, and if earlier in the podcast, if people are watching the whole thing, I went out to Phoenix and hired this company where they teach the elite methodology. And that's what got us back culturally sound, setting that vision and setting the strategy and building a leadership team. When Service Autopilot's Academy in its first state kind of just dissolved and didn't have Jonathan and Jason Cupp and those guys in there, I called Jonathan Potosnik and said, hey, is there any conflict of interest for us to bring this elite methodology and create another masterminds group? He gave me the blessing. Full transparency, we would have done it if he said no and he still wasn't doing it. That's what our division is. So we've got our masterminds group. You got to be at least $1 million in revenue. And we bring in this elite methodology, very similar to EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System. It's just a little more flexible. But I bring in the 8-figure business experts, the guys that went from 100 to 200 million at Keep, Miranda, Brett, David, a whole bunch of these guys. These are guys I learned from. So we have that elite day and we do some one-on-one with people's teams. And then every quarter we do live events. Our next one's going to be in Des Moines, Iowa. Corey Ballard at Ballard Products. We're doing a shop tour run by Corey. He's going to talk. Then we're going down the street to Sam Rankin's Etch Outdoor. I think he's running north of about 6 million this year. Shop tour. He's going to talk to us. And then we've got a whole bunch of guest speakers that are running anywhere from $5 to $20 million in revenue. So we've got that masterminds group. We meet monthly remotely. We do hot seats and we got live events. And then what we found out is there was a lot of people coming in saying, Mike, we want that, but we're not at $1 million. So we created our Scale and Scale Plus group. But basically, we've got about 12 to 15 business owners. But these certified coaches are still running multi-7-figure businesses. But they actually meet with our clients knee to knee virtually and help them walk through those 6 steps that I talked about. And traditionally, when they get to step 5, they've broken $1 million, they got the foundation, and then we build the leadership. So you got automations, job costing estimating, and our coaching division.
Cool, love it. So if someone wants to check out one of those things, how do they get a hold of you? What website do they go check out?
Yeah, if you're interested right now and you want to talk to somebody, easiest way to go to sgscall.com. You book a quick call with Dylan or Josh. Both past clients have sold their businesses, have been through our products. Sales guys, but honestly, good guys. If you're not a good fit, they'll tell you. And if there's something, like marketing, things like that, that's stuff we don't do. They're going to send you over to Jordan or somebody else that would be that person there. So sgscall.com, or if you want to check out the website, Simple Growth Systems with an S.com. And we do, I believe, have a few spots left. People want to join for that Des Moines, Iowa event, but it's very intimate, 30 to 35 people in the room. So it's knee to knee, basically support group and good networking.
Okay. Love it. Well, you heard him. If you're a local business owner that needs those things that Mike just talked about, go check him out. If you're a local business owner who needs more leads coming in, you can set up a free strategy session with me anytime at localcomets.com. And if you like content like this and you want to watch more, give us a follow. This is the Local Business Legends podcast. Mike, anything left for the viewers?
No, I appreciate it. No, just go out there and get after it. And if you haven't figured out that time management finances, go out and find somebody to help you or do it yourself. But those are going to be the keys for this year and years to come.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, guys.